Hi guys, so welcome to Nvivo, the sandpit. So this file, which I've either sent to you or put in Google Drive, has got all the consolidated participants. So they're also down, they're in files, but they're also listed as cases. So I've made them cases for reasons we might need that later on. So what we're looking to do is to explore. So we go to the Explore tab, and we're going to use the matrix coding query because that's the most flexible thing that we can do. So it turns out that Nvivo can't do quite what we wanted it to do when we were going through the presentation, because what we wanted to do essentially was search in 4 dimensions, and it'll only do 3 dimensions. So the first thing we wanted to look at was looking for where we had the mechanisms versus the productivity practice. But we're going to step back a bit from that because we can look at some more high-level stuff. So, for example, we can you can look for rows versus columns. So you can see that the little thing at the top, it says coding at rows and columns. So it's sort of looking for the intersection between things in the rows and things in the columns. So if we were really straightforward and we looked at putting all the cases or the files as the rows, and then we wanted to look at high level to say, let's look at the absorptive capacity. We select those ones. So we're now looking for across the cases as rows and looking for those codes. If we run, so you can run a query and save the result. So we can do that. I just want to give that a name. So case versus ACAP, for example, version 1. And then doing that, so then it will give us the results as a matrix. So it's giving us a number of references, first of all, that's the default. But you can also, quite interesting, you can look at the percentage of the row. There we go. So you can look at all the column. For in this case, the column's quite probably the most useful one. So you can see of all the where's all the assimilation happening. So and you can look at whether, in simple terms, whether it's coded yes or no. Sometimes that's quite useful when we've got more in the rows and the columns. So if we just go back to coding references, and what's really interesting, I only found this out today, is that I can get a chart which shows you how those things compare. So it shows the same information visually. So we want to take a new matrix. So what we can do is, between now and the meeting in December, is that we can all play around with the same file and dig a bit, because we can't do it necessarily by individual, which I'll show you in a minute. So what I thought maybe we'll do instead is for all to have a little play around and think and see what we can determine before we move on to the next phase. So if we just get rid of that coding and want to start a new one. So we'll go back to Explore, Matrix Coding. So we can narrow down where it says search in. So we can either choose in selected items. We could either choose to look at a particular person or to look at a particular set of codes. So if we chose to look at assimilation, So what we were wanting to before is look at a simulation in, say, just one of those cases, like Justin or Emma, whatever. Can't do that. It's not an and, it's an or in the way it does it. So we can just choose a simulation, for example, and then choose a simulation, codes, a simulation, okay, and then we're going to look for selecting the mechanisms, so we can click automatically select descendant codes because that makes a difference, and then we want to click those three. We're looking for mechanisms in the rows, similar to the diagram, and then we're looking for on the columns, we're looking for the productivity practices. So we now run that query. I'm not saving this one, but we could do. So that's looking at a chunk of data because it's looking across all the different cases because we can't select one case. So it does mean that we could also look at, in one particular case, we could look at comparing some of those things. We could look across all the different ACAP dimensions, for example. But I think this is probably the closest to what we were planning before. So this is looking at those. So we could look at percentages for the rows or percentages for the columns. So you can see here that's showing us that, well, in fact, we look at the chart, gives us an even better view. So that shows us, a little bit, zoom out a bit. So it shows us which productivity practices are most prevalent and which is the most prevalent factor. So championing integration of knowledge extraction, codification, etc. So we can see which one of those of the productivity practices is more likely to be related to those items. So what I suggest that we do is that you have a look at playing around with the different dimensions of the matrix. So, for example, we could, I forgot to show you something actually. So, if we look at ACAP versus the productivity practices, and if we ask it to look at, we'll put it in this one, codes in ACAP. And this time we could choose just to look in Justin. So takes a moment. So we look at column percentages of the row snails. So you can see which one of those productivity practices is most implicated in the different ACAP stages. So we can again look at the chart of what that looks like. Oh dear. I haven't quite mastered this particular technique. You can also look on, you can have those charts as a different, all sorts of different means of displaying it. So what it means is that essentially we've got 3 search dimensions. We can search like cross conjunctive coding or cross, it doesn't have to be cross coding, it could be anything, either an individual or a code versus each other. But we can then search, we can filter by searching in one particular aspect, whether that's a case or whether that's a particular ACAP dimension. So what it means is there's like different options of what we could do it. So I think we should have an explore, because the final thing that you can do, so here we can, if you click on the, let's pick one that's really higher than the other ones. So coding references. So here we've got 16 coding references for data analysis and exploitation. So when you click on that, it will open up so it tells you, it gives you the file where it's come from. So you scroll down, you can see all the different references to where it's been coded for those two items, where it's been coded for exploitation and data analysis. It shows you the conjunction, the coding extra fragment from that aspect, and then from there we can start to look. So that's why it's a bit more open than what we were looking at. So there we go. So I suggest that you have a play around with it. I will do the same, and then we can kind of compare results in December in Sheffield.